hacer dos modificaciones al programa. La primera es que para esta ocasión quisiera iniciar con la señora Janet Wick, quien nos explicará la experiencia de Singapur. Al estar ella conectada con esta enorme diferencia de horario, voy a abrir, posterior a su intervención, el espacio para debate. Así podemos interactuar, aprovechar la presencia de ella por unos minutos adicionales y poder despedirla para continuar después con la participación de Freya, que tenemos la dicha de tenerla en sala esta mañana. Haremos lo mismo, escucharemos su participación, abriré un espacio para el debate interactivo con ella y posteriormente escucharemos la experiencia o las experiencias en dos videos muy amplios, desarrollados con profundidad de los casos de Finlandia. Y posterior a eso abriré la interacción, pero bueno, no tendremos esperando a personas desde otro horario. Voy a retomar dos frases muy rápidas con las que se cerró el panel de ayer. Decía la diputada Andrea Álvarez que este es un ejercicio o un espacio que permite compartir experiencias, pero sobre todo aprender de quienes nos han antecedido. Eso es casualmente lo que esperamos suceda con esta sesión de esta mañana. Tenemos los casos de éxito, diría yo, originales o iniciales de Singapur y Finlandia, que antecedieron muchas de las experiencias o buenos casos para América Latina y el Caribe. Decía además Daniel Sobato que cerrando las experiencias de ayer, si la región debe ir o va a ir a un mecanismo vía congresos, vía parlamentos, o por el contrario a algo más sistémico, integral, de ambas vías, entiéndase desde el Congreso y desde el Ejecutivo. ¿Es esto posible? ¿Es muy ambicioso? ¿Se debe empezar por alguno de estos dos caminos? Eso es un poco lo que quisiéramos también escuchar esta mañana, en donde tendremos experiencias desde el Ejecutivo, desde el Congreso o desde los parlamentos y también el caso de Finlandia de lo que podríamos llamar un multiactor o algo más sistémico e integral y cómo esto puede ser emulado para nuestra región y ahí voy a aprovechar la experiencia en mesa de los casos de Chile y de Uruguay que han tenido, digamos que han antecedido y estoy segura han aprovechado muchas de las fortalezas o de oportunidades que han brindado estas experiencias para traerlas a sus casos. Así que bueno, sin más preámbulo, le doy la bienvenida a Janet Wick, directora general del Centro para Futuros Estratégicos, Grupo Estrategia de la Oficina del Primer Ministro Singapur, quien nos honra acompañándonos esta mañana de manera virtual. Bienvenida, Janet. Welcome. Thank you for your participation this morning here. It's a pleasure to have you, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, very well. Mm-hmm.
Excellent. Thank you very much for the invitation. Good morning to all of you from all of us here in Singapore. Allow me, I'm going to try to share my screen and hopefully it works. There. And hopefully you can see now the slides.
Yes, we do.
Thank you. So I thought today I would just very quickly share why we do foresight in the Singapore government, what's the impetus, and our experience in trying to embed foresight within the Singapore government and connect it to policymaking. And then hopefully we might have some time for discussion at the end. I realize that we've got a couple of you also have invited the Finns to speak at this session. And I also wanted to point out that we have a very different construct in Singapore than we have from the Finland example. In Singapore, the strategic foresight capability in government is really embedded in the executive, and not in parliament, not in the judiciary, but in the executive. But maybe I'll begin by saying a little bit about why Singapore is quite so concerned about uh, understanding the future or strategic foresight. Not just because our third prime minister said it, although he has said it very well. It's really because if you think about Singapore's model, a very open economy, very dependent on the international system, a very multicultural, multi-religious, textured society, very open to influences from beyond our shores, it really behooves us to pay attention. We really should pay attention to what is happening, what is changing, so that we can be prepared either to take advantage of new opportunity or to avoid or to deal with emerging challenges as they emerge, rather than waiting for them to become problems for us. And we have realized over time that strategic foresight as a tool helps us to deal with four big challenges that come at us from the future. The first, I'm sure all of you will be very familiar with, is this notion that change is accelerating. We have this sense that more and more things are changing faster and faster. And the size of the impact of these changes also seems to be increasing as we progress through the 21st century. So a tool that helps us get a handle on, try and understand these changes early is very helpful to government. The second is this notion of a wicked problem, that the challenges and the opportunities that we see emerging are increasingly interdependent, and we can't separate them out and solve them one by one in neat little buckets as we used to be able to do, because the challenges and opportunities that are coming at us have multiple causes, and the solutions have their own effects on various stakeholders. And so a more holistic approach and a more holistic understanding of what is happening is required. The third, again, I think would not be unfamiliar to you, is this notion of shocks and discontinuities. We are being surprised more frequently today than we have in the past, in part because of accelerating change, in part because of wicked problems. We must be prepared to constantly be surprised. And foresight has been a tool to help us develop some thinking around resilience that helps us deal with these shocks. The last is this notion of a hidden future and a powerful past. We cannot see the future clearly, and we have experienced the past. So we act very much as though the world tomorrow will look very much like the world yesterday, because that's the world that we're familiar with, even though empirical evidence suggests that's not true. And so we need to have some tools that help us think differently about the future, so the past can release its hold on us and we can adapt and be more resilient to this emerging future. So how have we done it? In Singapore, foresight has had a very long history, beginning with the implementation of scenario planning in the Ministry of Defense as early as the 1980s. Singapore only became an independent nation in 1965. So you'll see that it was very early on in our history that we decided we needed some kind of tool that helped us to do a little bit more of the long-term strategic planning. And it was so successfully used in the Ministry of Defense that by the mid-1990s, we had decided to make it a whole of government strategic planning tool. And we had created what we then very imaginatively called the Scenario Planning Office to do what we call the national scenarios. It is a way for us to take a long view, to consider the trends and challenges that affect and shape Singapore's environment over a 20-year time frame, and then to have good conversations about what we might want to do in response to those emerging challenges and opportunities. What you will see on screen is really a timeline of how that function, the strategic foresight function, has developed at the center of government over the last 20 or 30 years. And it has also been an experiment in how not just to do the work, to understand the future, but to connect that thinking to strategic decision-making and to policy planning. The most recent evolution of this process has been for the center to be transferred to what was set up in 2015, the strategy group in the Prime Minister's office. The strategy group, which is my parent organization today, was set up really to do two things: whole of government policy coordination and medium-term strategic planning. What the center does in relation to those two things is to provide the longer-term context for us to do our medium-term planning, but also to provide a reason for us to have strategic conversations about the future, to situate these, to build a common understanding of what that future might look like, what Singapore's challenges and opportunities in that context might be, and therefore what policy shifts we might want to make in the medium term. So foresight in this context provides a common lens for all our government agencies to have a common picture of what we think are the challenges and opportunities public policy needs to address, and then to develop a medium-term policy agenda to address those things. So how do we do this? At the CSF, we perform three main functions. The first function is Scout, which is what most people would think of when you say foresight, right? It's the research function where we work very hard to identify what the emerging trends and challenges might be to inform national priorities. Horizon scanning falls in this bucket. Deep dives to understand key issues also falls in this bucket. And we share this research with the policy community to try and inform thinking very early on. The second function is the challenge function. This is where I like to phrase it as we borrow the future as a safe space to talk about the present. We use the future as a way of challenging our prevailing assumptions. Do the mental models and policy assumptions that we use to make decisions today continue to hold true across a range of possible futures tomorrow? If they don't hold up well to a range of possible futures, then are there things that we should be changing today to make ourselves more resilient or more adaptable to that range of futures? The key idea in the challenge function is that we don't do strategic foresight to make better decisions about tomorrow. We do it to make better decisions about tomorrow today. And so we need to ask ourselves, what assumptions might we need to change in order to be better prepared for tomorrow? It's also the way that we build a common picture about the future landscape. And this is where scenarios have proven to be quite a powerful tool for us. The fact that we develop scenarios at a whole of government level and share them across agencies provides a shared context for us to have conversations and a shared vocabulary for us to talk about the future in a way that makes sense to agencies. The final function is grow. As the center of government agency in the Singapore government doing foresight, the center has a responsibility to build system capability and capacity, not only to develop strategic foresight products, but also in how to use the products to in decision making. We do this in a few ways. First of all, we teach at the Civil Service College, which is the training institute for the public service. We run courses for practitioners to help practitioners learn the skills, the tools, and the frameworks of strategic foresight. But we also participate in milestone programs for future public service leaders. And at these programs, we introduce the notion of strategic foresight to our policy community. We explain why foresight is significant and important to Singapore as a governance capability. And then we encourage our future leadership to think about how they can use the insights that emerge from foresight. A very lonely process. The teams are often small. and they're often the only teams in government that have a longer term horizon. Given that, we try and build up a community of practitioners across the public service. We convene ourselves a few times a year to share notes on what we're working on, and also to encourage one another in how we might carry the work of foresight through to decision making. Ultimately, the goal of the strategic foresight ecosystem is to reduce the frequency and amplitude of shocks that the government has to endure. We're very clear-eyed about the fact that we're not going to be able to reduce the number of shocks to zero, but we can try our best to prepare the system to better ride out the shocks that we have to face. And we do this in two ways. First, by doing what my senior advisor likes to call hunting black swans, where black swans are your surprising, game-changing, low-probability events, by being very curious about the world that we operate in and trying to reduce the unknown unknowns that we are not familiar with. The other is taming black elephants, where the black elephant is a cross between the elephant in the room, the issue that nobody wants to talk about, and a black swan. The idea being that if we can get the system to talk about the issues that we know might one day soon present us with challenges or opportunities, we can get them to talk about it early, perhaps through the lens of the future, then we will be more prepared for these challenges and opportunities when they eventually emerge. That's my last slide. I will stop there. I'm happy to take comments and questions if there are any at this point, but thank you once again for this opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you for this powerful presentation and sharing your ideas. Voy a abrir el espacio para interacción de preguntas. Me parece que Janet ha presentado de forma muy resumida elementos que tienen que ver desde luego de una experiencia desde el Ejecutivo, donde muchas veces la inmediatez y la necesidad de atender problemas en el corto plazo impiden tener o sostener una visión de largo plazo, y por eso el ejercicio de prospectiva desde la dinámica del Ejecutivo es una herramienta que vamos a explorar esta mañana por primera vez en el diálogo. Y el segundo elemento muy de valor sostenido a la presencia de ustedes como parlamentarios tiene que ver con esa sostenibilidad en el tiempo de las acciones y cómo un proceso como el que se ha presentado hoy contribuye muchísimo a ese ejercicio de sostenibilidad de estas acciones o herramientas en el tiempo. Así que bueno, tiene la palabra el secretario ejecutivo en primera instancia.
Yes, well, first of all, thank you very, very much. Very impressive, I think, the presentation and what's behind the work that you do. One can understand Singapore being Singapore, that you do this and have been doing it very effectively for many years and perfecting it. I have two questions, if I may, Janet. One is, how do you choose the topics on which you do scenario planning? Because, I mean, there are so many issues. I tell you, well, like here, for instance, for the region, for Latin America, we have this, like a list of 10, or, I mean, you can make any number of a list of topics. One would think that you would do, like, for the different areas of public policy, like health, education, productive development, this and that. But I mean, this is really a question. How do you choose the topic, how broad, how narrow, to do the scenario planning and the horizon scanning that you talked about? And my second question is, do you apply this, or rather, I'm sure you apply this, but how do you apply this to the analysis of the world conditions, the world economy, and geopolitics? Do you do scenario planning, horizon scanning for geopolitics? Thank you.
Excellent. Daniel, adelante, por favor. Vamos a tomar un grupo de preguntas.
Thank you so much. Great presentation. I have two questions. Number one is, why Singapore decided to locate the foresight office only in the executive branch instead of having also another one in the parliament. What were the reasons behind that? Because here in Latin America it's the other way around. The comisiones, the future committees are located in the Congress and not necessarily in the executive. Has this any relation because of the political regime? Because we are a presidential system, you are more a parliamentary one, so that's number one. Number two, in terms of the methodology, I think that is very important. We don't used to talk about black elephants. We used to talk about gray rhinos. The difference between black swans and the rhinos, you are using elephants. But they are completely different because with the black swans, there is very difficult to predict when that is going to happen. On the gray rhinos or black elephants, for me, those are the most important one because you already know that. The problem is that you neglect how dangerous they are until they almost kill you. So which is the methodology behind that? Thank you so much again.
Excellent
Should I-
questions. Yes, Janet, please go ahead.
Sure, yeah. They are really excellent questions. Which is great. Because I love difficult questions. I'll take them in order, shall I? How do we choose topics? It's very much not a science, more like an art. The fact that we're situated in the strategy group today has helped us a lot with deciding what our research agenda should be, because the team now has a much better situational awareness of what the policy community is already working on, is already aware of, and doesn't really need more impetus from the center to do. And so we typically choose to focus on issue areas where we think the system is not paying enough attention, either because they are emergent, so they're so new that there is no policy owner for any of these issues yet, or very frequently, they fall at the intersection of issues, where two different types of trends or two different types of opportunities or challenges might coincide. And again, there is often unclear how to proceed, partly because perhaps the policy owner is not clear, or perhaps because the path forward is unclear. And that's where then the center assesses our input might be most valued by the system. It does relate to what kinds of issues that we choose to pay attention to. We do, at the center of government, where the center sits, pay attention to issues that affect all of Singapore and all of Singaporeans. So it includes issues that are social in nature, geopolitical in nature, economic in nature, for example, because all of these things do affect Singapore's ability to Singapore and Singaporeans' ability to make a living, or affect the amount of policy space that we have to operate in the world. So we do apply our scenario, when we do our national scenarios, for example, we cast the net very widely. And the trends that we consider do range from the geopolitical forces, what does the international system look like, what might the international economy look like in 20 years, all the way to the rather micro, right? The forces that affect how your daily life. And we try and stitch all of that together through our scenarios into a coherent picture for our policy community to pay attention to. As to the question of why we've chosen to situate foresight in the public service, really, not just the executive, but within the public service, rather than in the parliament, in the legislature. I think part of it is an accident of history, where the function began was really because there were individuals at the time who were interested in foresight and interested in the value that foresight could bring to government and governance. And they were the ones who pushed for the establishing of scenario planning in MINDEF, and then eventually scenario planning in the Public Service Division. So that is probably the reason why we began in the public service, but also the model of working in Singapore. The public service works very closely with our political leaders. And therefore, I think we don't just serve the public service, but also the elected government of the day. I guess we've just never felt the need to embed this elsewhere in government, in part because the center and the public service and the foresight ecosystem within the public service do see it as our responsibility to Singapore and Singaporeans, not just, to the government. I don't know if that helps clarify the question, but that's been my experience with why we've been situated the way we are. The last question about black swans versus grey rhinos or black elephants is a perpetual challenge for the center. They are quite different animals, as you rightly point out. Black swans, by definition, cannot be spotted in advance, right? You can only see a black swan after the crisis has happened. But it is the reason that we do horizon scanning and the reason that we look for emerging signals of change is to try and catch as many of these black swans as early as possible. But at the same time, you're right in that it is important to get the system to talk about the known unknowns, the issues that we already know are going to be challenges or opportunities, to try and get some early momentum before it's, before they become a problem or before we miss the chance to take advantage of an emerging opportunity. The tool that we have found quite useful for that has actually been scenario planning. If you're familiar with scenario planning, I would argue that it's not very good at spotting discontinuous change, which is what a black swan typically is, right? It's a surprise, it's unanticipated. But it is quite good at getting the system, getting your stakeholders, your audience to understand emerging black elephants, emerging issues that might be significant challenges or opportunities, and provides a safe space for us to talk in hypotheticals about how these issues might be dealt with before they become reality. And that's how the center has been encouraging addressing of your grey rhinos or your black elephants. I hope that answers the questions. Happy to take more.
Thank you very much. Solo una clarificación que debía haber hecho, la traducción a ella también le llega en simultáneo del español al inglés, así que si cualquiera quiere hacer una pregunta en español, ella tendría también la traducción al inglés para que si alguien, digamos, quisiera tener en cuenta eso. ¿Otra pregunta? Bueno, thank you very much, Janet. I think it was a very excellent presentation. We have also the slides that you used that we will share with all the participants. And, ¿tienes otra? No. Okay, and I think there was a very important point that you mentioned about champions, individuals that were interested in these processes. And I think this is what we are developing right now with this network of champions thinking in these issues. Thank you very much for your participation.
Thank you all.
Bueno, ahora tenemos también la enorme suerte de contar con Freya Windle, quien está de manera presencial, pero antes quisiera agradecerle en nombre de CEPAL, Freya, por toda tu colaboración, quien has hecho posible de alguna forma agrupar este grupo de experiencias fuera de la región de América Latina y el Caribe, como el caso de Singapur y el caso de Finlandia. Fue gracias a ella que tuvimos los contactos, los enlaces y me atrevería a decir hasta el interés de los actores de participar gracias a la interacción de Freya. Freya es actualmente es parte de la Dirección General de Asociaciones, Estrategia y Comunicación de la Democracia Parlamentaria en la Unión Europea y nos va a compartir esta mañana la experiencia del Parlamento Europeo. Bienvenida, muchísimas gracias y de nuevo Un placer tenerte hoy por acá.
Bueno, el placer también es el mío, lo digo inmediatamente. Thank you very much, Sylvia, for having outlined these points. And first and foremost, good morning to everybody. I'm happy to be here. And thank you for inviting me to this highly relevant and very timely point at a regional conference about parliamentary committees of the future and strategic foresight. Before I start my intervention, I would also like to say that I find it key that you managed to invite the political side of our institution, which is a member of parliament. He outlined the way they work and his insights, and that you are doing the same thing for the administration, so a representative of the civil service that works on the foresight processes, similar as Jeanette just outlined, and implements the processes into the structure for the policy making. So, I need to click my presentation, I'm sorry. Which way do I point it to? This is the magic, the technical magic I love. Otherwise, I don't know where I can do it without. There, so quick. I'll give you a quick overview. I will give you an insight of where the EU's strategic foresight process comes from, how it was structured. Then we will look at the most notable lessons in the EU's foresight journey to then move on to the most notable challenges, at least in my view, that we faced. And if we still have time, the timekeeper is next to me here, Sylvia. I also came up with some ideas that might be helpful for you when structuring a culture of foresight in Latin America and the Caribbean. But we can also leave that for later. So let's go to the first point. Where does the EU's strategic foresight process come from? And so this is my slide. We started with the origins with a set of crises that hit Europe and the world. Their magnitude and long-term consequences could not be foreseen. The supposed stabilities of the years 2000 failed. And which were these crises? We have them there, the financial crisis in 2008, the Great Recession that followed over years and the European Union with it, and then the migration crisis linked to the Arab Spring that brought millions of refugees to our borders and in our countries. So after lots of short-term firefighting, our members were very sure about one thing, and that one thing was that the Union needed a new tool to read the future, to anticipate and prepare responses. The idea of anti-participatory governance was emerged then. So ESPAS was born as a pilot project. ESPAS is the scientific foresight process in the European institution. Was born as a pilot project in 2010, securing a budget line within the EU budget. It was extended in 2012, delivering a first global trends report. After having been established by our members, so legislators like here in the Chilean Senate and that are present here today, the Parliament gave its green light in 2014 for a second phase of this project. And that put into place a permanent interinstitutional system that identifies and analyzes long-term trends. So how is our process structured? Let's look at the balance and synergies. And before that, I'll give a peek at the past, because we must value the interinstitutional framework. In particular, the new role of our parliament that was obtained in 2008 with the last intergovernmental Treaty of Lisbon. Here we received more important roles. For one, that is electing the European Commission's president, so the executive's president, following the European elections, a process we find ourselves in right now. Secondly, becoming a co-legislator. So the legislative proposals and the budget of the Union had now to pass through our parliament, and not only as before, the member states at national level. So in short, ESPAS, our strategic foresight process, was born in an institution that was developing its prerogatives, including that of the agenda setting. Simultaneously, the initiators of ESPAS realized that foresight would be more effective when working together, something Jeanette also outlined just now. So ESPAS became an interinstitutional system, a system that linked the foresight units of the EP, the European Parliament, and others. So the Council, where the EU leaders sit, setting the political agenda, and the European Commission, so the executive body. And later others, such as the External Action Service, so the correspondent to a Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the external geopolitical view, the Committee of the Regions to link the territorial factors of regions, provinces, municipalities, and the Economic and Social Committee. This links the economic actors were involved. And now 2 more milestones. 2019, the Commission's first Vice President for Foresight was nominated. So we're taking it to the highest level possible in the executive. Then a network of ministers for the future was established on a nation-state level. And lastly, another milestone for our institution, in 2023, we nominated a Vice President for Foresight. And the very latest news, just hot off the press, I had to add this, is that our members now are calling for a real Committee of the Future in the European Parliament, now in July 2024. So let's see what happens. This is one of the unknown unknowns. We're waiting for the replies. And with that, I'll move on. I'll finish this section about ESPAS and how we came to the strategic foresight process and move to the key question for this panel, which are the most notable lessons. Which are them in our foresight journey? I would like to highlight 4 capabilities here, because in the EU institutions, we learned that embedding foresight in policy making can help us anticipate the future and prepare better for the future we want, rather than, like in the past, being driven by crises and unknown events. So after having set up the ESPAS process amongst now, in the meantime, 9 EU bodies, so we have grown, we have expanded, we can say that these 4 capabilities you see on the screen are useful to ensure that foresight can achieve its purpose. So 1, that's expertise and tools. So a wide set of tools, methods, expert knowledge, science, academia should be involved and around the policy area. We need to create a foresight-friendly organizational structure. So building a structural and functional capability within your organization helps to embed and integrate foresight in management processes. So for example, I'll take us. We have foresight units, policy foresight, global trends analysis, strategic foresight within the research service. The research service has a director general, and the director general is directly linked to the secretary general, so the head of the administration. Then identify and create a network of senior leaders, foresight champions. You just mentioned it, Sylvia, a clear word, foresight champions, and other supporters within and beyond your organization to strengthen your efforts. And do make sure that these people really are committed to foresight, to promote it correctly. I'm looking at Roberto here because I think he is one of these examples. And lastly, effective communication. Ensure that your results are communicated as widely as possible with different stakeholders. And then the process and the value of foresight needs to be translated, Jeanette said the same thing, into the right vocabulary that matches your institution and into your vision and your strategy. Processes are linked to strategies. One last slide on this topic, 3 dimensions. My experience says that these can help you as soon as you have a foresight-friendly environment. Look at the time frame. Which time frame is relevant for your decision? Are you looking at 5 years, 10 years, 15, or maybe 20, as we did in the last Global Trends report? What is the purpose of the exercise? Do you want to build resilience? Do you want to check strategies, stress test legislation, look for alternatives? And then bring together different perspectives. Go beyond your common ideas and expert views. Be participative, be inclusive. And lastly, once you have found your strategic direction, act in an aligned fashion. This equally should apply to your policy areas. Challenges. It all sounds so easy, but de facto, it's a longer process. Jeanette showed several years. We in the European Union are much younger here, so we've barely more than a decade. We're seriously working on this. So these are the challenges, I would say, with my experiences, are the ones that kept us busy. So for one, it is building a solid network, and one that persists over the different policy cycles and legislative terms. Make it to stay. Don't have it only for 5 years in one cycle, and then everything's cleared out and then new people come. Another, for us in the legislative key point is the Cassandra effect. We have found that the more negative the scenarios are, the less people want to deal with them. The challenge is to warn without overwhelming and to give concrete ideas for action. So warning alone creates a sense of helplessness. There is a psychology behind this. Scenarios are good, but they cannot all be dystopias. People run away from them. Success, a key question. People always ask, does foresight work? Is it successful? So how do you tell, and how can you tell that it works? For us, we have established in the Parliament impact assessment within the research service. So that is one thing. We stress test the different things at the beginning of the policy cycle. The European Commission has created a regulatory scrutiny board. This regulatory scrutiny board works and supports better regulation commitments, including impacts on competitiveness and the integration of foresight into policy making. That's very abstract, so I hope you can more or less read it. I thought I'd add this image of the cycle of the scrutiny board, and you see there before implementation you have an evaluation and fitness check. This sounds sportive, but it is sportive. To the fitness check, we have impact assessment that is linked, and within the cycle, you see the arrows going up and down, is also the foresight process. Before it then goes to the legislative proposal, the approval process, the legislation and implementation. One thing, this is a slide I added, I know the time's short, but I thought following yesterday's discussion and Blanca's mentioning of the budget, and not Guido, but Guido, sorry to get you, I want to get your name right, you also spoke about the budget yesterday and how important it is, so that's why I wanted to add this question. So we have a multi-annual budget, simply because foresight needs a transition chain. In the European Union, we have it thanks to these interlinked steps I will outline now. So every 5 years, ESPAS, our foresight process, provides a new global trends report. For example, in April 2019, we looked at 2030. This is the latest one we published now in April, where we look at 2040. So we're going a bit more than 20 years ahead. On the basis of these reports, and considering the outcome of the latest European elections, the heads of state and government will now adopt the so-called strategic agenda for the next 5-year legislature. Our parliament plays a major role since it has to express its support via its vote in July, both on the strategic agenda and the designated president of the Commission. This guarantees the democratic process. Thereafter, we start discussing about a multi-annual budget, so the so-called multi-annual financial framework. This MFF brings our strategic thinking to concrete policy choices and budgetary allocations, not for 5, but for the next 7 years. Finally, based on the agreed budgetary envelopes, investment plans at national, regional, and local level are implemented. And this is the way work on foresight is also translated into concrete actions for local preparedness. Just to give you some numbers, in this transmission chain, the regional cohesion policy of the European Union plays a major role. It represents 1/3, so 30% of the Union's budget, and that is around 50 billion euro every year, and constantly over the 7-year period. This stability of funding allows our regional authorities, cities to plan and invest for the long term. So bottom up, top down, but yes, also bottom up, our union can thus move towards long-term objectives and be prepared to address the risks and uncertainties detected by foresight processes. One example, just for you to look at, I'm not going to speak about it a lot, one example with a clear timeline and a concrete example on a global trend and its policy action, climate change. So here you can see April 2019, in the previous report, we mentioned the mega trend. Then it was implemented in the strategic agenda, so the heads of states that proposed the strategic agenda, where the target was climate neutrality to 2050. That was linked to multi-annual framework that runs until 2027, where 30% of the EU budget is dedicated to climate action. The regional and local plans have a mission, so that is climate neutral cities by 2040. And now in April 2024, the new ESPA's Global Trends takes it on again, not only climate change, but talking about the acceleration of the trend and that we need added adaptation and resilience. 3 last things, quick, these are still the challenges because I had 6. Maximizing synthesis and condensing information. Being an interinstitutional process with 9 bodies participating means a great source of information. Not everything can be taken on board. Building in-house capacity. Janet spoke about it, I won't delve into this any further, it's the same thing. Short-termism, a legislative topic. Focus on the political mandate. In politics, we simply often experience that solving the immediate comes before thinking ahead and shaping the long term. And so now up to the key person here, our moderator. Do we, and up to you, do you have time and are you interested in some ideas that came to my mind?
Of course, go ahead.
Yeah, okay. This was on the airplane. I was sitting there, 14-hour flight, and I thought, okay, I need to do something. I'm getting bored. I don't like the films they have. So I thought, here's some ideas. So what about creating a LAC, so Latin American and Caribbean network of political leaders who advocate for policy making that considers the long-term and complex issues? So the idea of foresight champions. Another one, I thought, develop interparliamentary platforms for exchange, fellowships. We have come to find that with the relations with national parliaments in the Union, fellowships are very helpful. Training. Create a foresight network with regions and cities. Why? Because your continent is huge, and your regions are very diverse, economically, geographically. So have a network there to have the territorial level represented. One thing we learned when we started in 2015 with the Global Trends Unit is it's no use trying to reinvent the wheel, commission X amount of studies and draft everything yourself. You cannot do it and it doesn't make sense. Especially when you're starting, use what's already there. Use the publications on global trends, global risks, etc. by the UN, the EU, the National Intelligence Council is very good, the OECD, etc. The private sector also has interesting stuff to inform your foresight efforts. Facilitate and support an international network of parliamentarians with a commitment to developing strategic foresight in national contents. We created, this is the next point, a handbook for the Ukraine a year or 1.5 years ago on how to develop proposals for establishing foresight. Also useful. Collect case studies for capacity building, institutional strengthening from different countries. But realize always that foresight will be applied differently depending on your region and the ecosystem. And with that, thanks for your time, your attention.
Thank you, Freya. Thank you very much. And of course, ideas is what we need. So thank you for this last slide that you provide with your ideas. So if there's any question.
Justamente la idea de establecer una red de parlamentarios que estuviesen interesados en los temas prospectivos fue justamente la necesidad de poder generar la cumbre de comisiones de desafíos del futuro. Hoy día tenemos una cumbre que ya ha tenido 12 actividades globales, la primera en Finlandia, la segunda en Montevideo, Nosotros aspiramos justamente a realizar la tercera en Chile, en el Parlamento chileno, y ha sido parte de un esfuerzo de aprovechar justamente la capacidad instalada en los distintos parlamentos. Por otra parte, desde la Comisión de Desafíos del Futuro de Chile, hemos estado tratando de formar comisiones de desafíos del futuro en el resto de los países. Hay un esfuerzo muy importante y que generalmente el esfuerzo es inicial y luego adquiere una dinámica propia en los respectivos países. Eso ha sido, lo tratamos de hacer en Argentina, se logró crear en su momento, pero no se pudo materializar por un cambio de justamente de presidente, de ejercicio en el Ejecutivo, y al presidente Macri estaba comprometido, pero cuando vino el cambio de gobierno finalmente no prosperó el esfuerzo, debido a que el vicepresidente en ese país encabeza el Senado. Y lo propio respecto a los esfuerzos que se hicieron con Uruguay, que Uruguay adquirió prontamente velocidad con Rodrigo Goñi y que está haciendo un esfuerzo importante. Lo mismo estamos tratando de hacer con Bolivia, donde estamos trabajando con el PNUD, y 3 diputados y 3 senadores bolivianos vinieron a ver la experiencia de la Comisión de Desafíos del Futuro. También el Parlatino, también fue un esfuerzo que se inició desde la Comisión de Desafíos del Futuro de Chile. También otro esfuerzo que hubo, bueno, se está trabajando en paralelo con parlamentarios brasileños, con parlamentarios de distintos países justamente para formar esa masa crítica. Entonces, ¿cómo formamos la red? Es clave, porque acá lo que tenemos que aprovechar es las experiencias de otros países. Otro tema que ayer íbamos a conversar y no pudimos hacerlo, dice relación con la continuidad, asegurar la continuidad, y por eso es tan importante la institucionalidad. En Chile estamos preocupados porque justamente los parlamentarios que hemos estado liderando esto, Guido Girardi salió del Parlamento, y afortunadamente logramos que creó la Fundación de Encuentros del Futuro y por tanto sigue con este tema muy potente. Pero en los próximos 20 meses, tanto Juan Antonio Coloma como el que habla, nos vamos del Parlamento, nos vamos del Senado, y eso implica efectivamente, tenemos preocupación respecto de la continuidad y estamos tratando de entusiasmar a otros que estén en esta misma lógica que implica generosidad y no visibilidad. Y esto es muy difícil de encontrar en política, entonces, porque esto ocupa muchas horas de tiempo. Y por tanto, más bien el liderazgo político está empeñado en hacer actividades de touch and go, más que finalmente establecer políticas de largo plazo que implican sumergirse en encontrar rumbo. Y por otro lado, finalmente lo que quería agregar es que trabajar con la academia ha sido muy importante, trabajar con el mundo de la ciencia ha sido muy importante. Yo voy a poner a disposición de ustedes, entregué ya la secretaría, nuestra formulación de las 25 comisiones en políticas nacionales para que finalmente también se trabaje sobre lo avanzado en otros países. Sabemos que las realidades no son iguales, no son idénticas, las proyecciones, las perspectivas de cada país son distintas. También entregué una copia del proyecto de institucionalidad prospectiva. Ese es un proyecto que puede ser adaptado en los respectivos países. También está acompañado con la contrapropuesta del Ejecutivo, que también es una contrapropuesta, pero podemos trabajar sobre texto. Y esto es tan importante porque, por ejemplo, el Parlamento inglés copió exactamente nuestra ley de neuroderecho, exacta. O sea, hizo copy-paste. Pero eso no es malo, ¿eh? No es malo porque en definitiva, aun cuando no nos haya... sí, son muy buenos. Aunque no nos haya dado el crédito, no importa. No salimos mencionados como Parlamento chileno, pero da lo mismo. Lo importante es cómo somos capaces de ir replicando los ejercicios justamente para que otros países vayan trabajando sobre los esfuerzos que han hecho otros. Y yo quiero agradecer tu exposición porque realmente es muy interesante. El tema, finalmente, me pareció relevante el tema de la capacitación. Porque, vuelvo a insistir, la perspectiva no es retórica del futuro. Acá implica método. Flaxo está haciendo, yo estoy haciendo la maestría en Flaxo, sobre perspectiva, que es la única que se da en español, y por tanto ahí yo creo que sería súper interesante posibilitar justamente esas herramientas que nos permitan justamente dar entrenamiento en materia de perspectiva. Eso, gracias.
Gracias. Voy a tomar una pregunta o una interacción, bueno, dos adicionales. Les voy a pedir que por favor seamos muy directos con el comentario o consulta. Todavía tenemos dos intervenciones de dos personas más y debemos concluir a las 10:30. Tengo a la diputada Álvarez y al congresista, al senador Coloma, que quieren intervenir. Con esto cerraríamos este espacio.
Muchas gracias. Sí, muy rápido. En términos de la formación necesaria para quienes van a liderar esto desde la parte administrativa de los congresos, ¿cómo se puede lograr esa formación? ¿Tiene que ser a nivel, por ejemplo, de carrera o de maestría? En Costa Rica hay una maestría en prospectiva, o puede ser como capacitaciones más cortas que sí le darían a la gente las herramientas para poder trabajar en esto. ¿Qué tan profundo tiene que ir la capacitación? Gracias.
Senador.
Muchas gracias. Lo mío es muy breve. Particularmente pensando en la Unión Europea, digamos, ¿cómo se plantea cuando hay que renovar un proceso que lo que se hizo fue exitoso? Porque esto no es tan fácil, digamos, porque uno mira hacia adelante, la perspectiva puede ser infinita también, pero particularmente hay minutos que uno tiene que decir esto fue en la línea correcta. Hay logros específicos, se les pide metas concretas, porque eso también es parte de los procesos, digamos. Cuando un proyecto se declara exitoso, sobre todo en uno que tiene una lógica de largo plazo.
Excelente, muchas gracias. Y a mí me parece también muy interesante esta interinstitutional framework, que si nos puedes explicar un poquito también cómo es la interacción o este formato de participación con esta red de actores que ustedes interactúan desde los parlamentos, me parece muy valioso como experiencia para los casos aquí presentes.
The difficulty with you as participants is that you ask really good questions, but as Jeanette said, good questions are challenging and therefore more fun too. So, Andrea Alvarez, on the question of training, this is something we've been looking at over the years, and essentially speaking, we started off first with external training, so training provided across the institutions by external providers specialized in the field until we had a certain amount of our own in-house capacity, notably in the European Parliament Research Service. And so now we have got to the point where our research service trains any other level in the European Parliament's administration. So it can be a policy researcher, it can be somebody that works in external policies, somebody that works in internal policies, or in a specific policy area, such as AI, which is very big at the moment. And how long and how deep should they be? That was another question. What we have come to learn is that yes, you need experts that know the details in depth, so the people that are really informed about it, sort of like an academic. Again, the research service, that's why our foresight units are linked in the research service. But we also learned that it is good to have sort of a mainstream basic idea of what foresight is and how you can use it individually and for your professional work. So that is not so much in depth, but it is a conscience that it is there and that you can apply it, which motivates people then also to use it due to this awareness raising. Mr. Coloma, the renewal of the process and how to ensure it is done successfully. Though this is why we have it on different levels. So we have it at the administrative level, That goes for all of our EU bodies in the Council. The Foresight Unit is linked to the administration, and the Commission is linked to the administration. In fact, the Commission has a full Directorate General that only focuses on these things, so behavioral insights, scientific and technological foresight, global trend analysis, etc. It's called the Joint Research Center. So they have created a full DG with several hundred colleagues that only do this. So you have it at the level of administration with civil servants that stay, that are not there for cycles, but more or less for the full career, and that try and develop in the field over the years. And that ensures continuity. And an example is the ESPAS report that every 5 years in the cycle, continuously we produce, and we tell the incoming presidents, this is it. Here it is. We put it on their table, and there's a photo of our former commission president with him arriving in office the first day, and the first thing you see on the desk is the Global Trends report. And this is this awareness raising at this level that it is there. You cannot overlook it. It is relevant. I hope that helped. I thought that was your question. And now the interinstitutional framework, that was yours, the different stakeholders. How do we communicate them? How do we involve with them? So what we have is different, especially when we're writing the report, we have different project teams that focus on different megatrends and different policy areas. These project teams over the different institutions, and that is this bulge, mass of information we get, is collected. So it's sort of a scoping, if you so want. Then after the scoping, we do a wind tunneling and reduce the topics to come down to a more condensed amount of information. That is then presented to a steering group. The steering group in the ESPAS process consists of the Secretary Generals, so again, the high-level administration, and the vice presidents for foresight. They look at the content, and from there it is approved. So this is the high-level support you have to have in your process. And then it goes down back to the people drafting and thinking about the different options. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Freya. Thank you for your participation.
Thank you.
Ahora tendremos dos videos pregrabados, uno de Timo Harakka, miembro del Parlamento de Finlandia, exministro de Transporte y Comunicaciones, vicepresidente del Comité para el Futuro del Parlamento de Finlandia, y también de Sirkka Heinonen, profesora emérita del Centro de Investigación de Futuro de Finlandia de la Universidad de Turku. Voy a pedir que por favor pongan ambos videos, uno inmediatamente después del otro, para posteriormente abrir un espacio breve de interacción y robarle unos minutos a la pausa para el café.
Representatives of the Latin American Committees of the Future, dear colleagues. I would like to convey greetings from the Finnish Parliament and thank you for the invitation to this outstanding and important event, the first regional conference of parliamentary committees of the future. At the same time, on behalf of the Finnish Committee for the Future, I apologize that our committee was unable to participate in the conference either in person or virtually in real time. However, we are grateful for the opportunity to attend this conference in the form of a video greeting. In my presentation, I have been asked to share experiences regarding Finland's foresight system and, in particular, the related collaboration with various stakeholders. I've also been asked to discuss how this Finnish model was created and how other countries, for example in Latin America, could create something similar. When describing our committee, I often emphasize that in Finland, even future has a history. Finland has long traditions in foresight and futures research. The Parliament's Committee for the Future was established 30 years ago. Around the same time, the Futures Research Centre was founded at the Turku School of Economics. The foundation for all this was laid by a non-governmental organisation, the Finnish Society for Future Studies. It was founded as early as 1980 by stakeholders and individuals interested in futures research and in foresight from government, the corporate world, universities and NGOs alike. So it's not just about the Committee for the Future, but also about scientific futures research, teaching future studies and having extensive public discussion and engagement where various associations have played a significant role. Later on, conferences organised by universities also contributed to linking Finnish futures research to international expertise. In addition, Finnish cities and regions have also started looking to the future from their own local perspectives. This activity has been reinforced by law, which means that local and regional foresight is virtually mandatory in Finland. Within the state administration, several ministries have developed foresight methods to assess, above all, the development of future jobs and the corresponding educational needs. Finland has always been renowned for its education system. As a small country, its most important competitive advantage is expertise, which is why expertise has always been consciously and systematically developed. A significant player in Finnish foresight has also been the Finnish Innovation Fund, Sitra, established in 1967 in honor of the 50th anniversary of Finland's independence. Creating a successful Finland for tomorrow was defined as its mission, and this too was mandated by law. Over the years, Sitra has become a sort of a super think tank, leading future-oriented discussions aimed at the renewal of society. Ladies and gentlemen, the Parliament of Finland's Committee for the Future is often referred to as a Finnish future innovation. And indeed, in its own way, it is, as it's the world's first committee for the future. However, the real innovation that took place in Finland in the early 90s was the government's report on the future. The Committee for the Future is actually the conjoined twin, or the flip side, of the government report. One would not exist without the other. Let me explain why. In 1993, the Parliament decided to require the government to produce a report on Finland's long-term future. And whenever the government in Finland provides a report, then one of the committees must prepare the Parliament's response to it. Therefore, it was decided that a committee for the future would be established to respond to the report on the future. This process was successful, and the report on the future became a permanent obligation for every government, and responding to it became a central task for the parliamentary committee. In other words, foresight was institutionalized. The report on the future plays a significant role in strengthening Finland's national foresight system and future policy. And when we talk about the report, we mean the entire continuous and long-term process in which the government and the parliament engage in dialogue on Finland's long-term future. Since the first World Summit of the Committees of the Future, held in Helsinki in 2022, we've had discussions with other countries' committees for the future on many occasions. Sometimes the situation is such that the first challenge of a committee for the future is to come up with a task for itself. However, the secret to the success of the Finnish model may lie in getting started by defining the task first. Based on Finland's experience, the government's future reports and the parliament's responses to them provide an excellent framework for national future policy. Nowadays, the Committee for the Future also prepares the Parliament's response to the government's Agenda 2030 report, because sustainable development is almost as extensive and multidisciplinary a theme as the future itself. Thus, the Finnish model emerges, in which the government and the Parliament engage in slow but continuous dialogue on Finland's long-term future and sustainable development. The preparation of the government's future report and the Agenda 2030 report takes about a year, and the government invites hundreds of stakeholders to participate in the process. Similarly, the Committee for the Future itself also consults up to 200 specialists while drafting its reports. All of this takes approximately 6 months. Also worth benchmarking is Finland's parliamentary model, which is based on expert hearings. It's one of the core functions of evidence-based decision-making, through which, once again, the involvement of as many as hundreds of stakeholders and the best possible information are ensured in the work and decision-making process. So essentially, it's not just about Finland's national foresight system, or ecosystem as it's called these days, but more broadly about the decision-making model and culture that's based on evidence. Foresight information is utilized in the same way and within the same process as any other scientific information. Behind all of this is the underlying need to ensure the high-level expertise of Finnish society. Dear colleagues, as politicians, we all know, however, that from time to time situations arise where urgent tasks accumulate for the government, and in recent years, international crises have easily shifted attention from long-term visioning to short-term survival battles. And when it feels like we do not even know what will happen next week, then what is the point of spending time contemplating what will happen in 20, 30 or 50 years? Well, the government resolved this by initiating a joint and continuous foresight effort amongst the ministries, where all the ministries carry out futures work together at the same time in order to form a shared vision and understanding of the challenges and opportunities in Finland's operating environment. At the same time, the Committee for the Future concluded in its discussions that the joint and continuous foresight effort between all the ministries, as described earlier, forms the first part of the future report issued once per parliamentary term. Following this extensive analysis of the operating environment, the government can choose the most important future themes and create a more politically guided and selected second part of the future report. So instead of 1, 2 future reports are now prepared during each parliamentary term. So the first part of the two-part model involves continuous official foresight work, while the second part reflects the specific choices of each government. Our approach to examining the future must be both systematic and continuous. However, since we do not live in a linear world, we must incorporate new and hopefully even surprising elements into foresight. Ladies and gentlemen, with over 30 years of future history behind us, I wish the first regional conference of parliamentary committees of the future success, and I hope that we will meet again in the future. In this regard, I'd also like to relay a proposal from the Finnish Parliament's Committee for the Future. At the second World Summit of the Committees of the Future, held in Uruguay in autumn 23, it was agreed that the Interparliamentary Union, IPU, would convene the third summit. Activating the IPU in this matter is bound to be beneficial for the development and promotion of global future policy. However, our proposal is that the first regional conference of parliamentary committees of the future, now convened, could assist the IPU and jointly make a proposal on where and when the third World Summit of the Committees of the Future should be held. It is better for the committees themselves to be active in this matter. And since Latin America, Chile, for example, has a future history almost as long as Finland's, the first regional conference of the parliamentary committees of the future would be the perfect place to make this proposal. So once again, dear colleagues, I thank you for your invitation and wish you a successful rest of the summit from the Nordic region.
Muy bien. Y agradecería que puedan poner el siguiente video.
Un placer darle una presentación en esta importante conferencia suya. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished representatives of the Latin American Committees of the Future, it is a great pleasure to give you virtual greetings from Finland to this important first regional parliamentary foresight conference in Chile. Finland is the country of the future. With only a very small population of 5.5 million, we have always had to be very vigilant and set our eyes on the future. For survival, both because of harsh and demanding weather conditions, and on the other hand, due to geopolitical constraints and conundrums. Through our national characteristics, which is cognitive and psychological element called sisu, we look constantly and systematically to the future. It is our strive to preserve equality, independence, democracy, and social welfare as the basic pillars of our country. My warmest congratulations to Chile for organizing this first regional conference on parliamentary committees of the future in Latin America. It is a great pleasure to be invited to convey my thoughts on the Finnish national foresight ecosystem. I'm currently Professor Emerita at Finland Futures Research Center, which is the Academic Future Studies Unit and Department at University of Turku. FFRC was established in 1992, and we conduct research, train students both in our international master's program as well as doctoral program. In addition, we wish to have a societal impact and support decision makers at all levels in society. My most recent projects have been concerned with the future of cities, security, crisis management, and the transformation of work and work life. I also bring you greetings from the Finnish Society for Future Studies, which was founded in 1980, in which I have been active since its early years. As an ordinary member, Secretary General, Chairman, member of the board, and now as an honorary member. It has also been most interesting to monitor the development of our entire national foresight ecosystem. In my opinion, the Finnish Committee of the Future has a very special role and importance in the Finnish national foresight ecosystem. It is usually effective to promote a field if there are enthusiastic, knowledgeable, and visionary pioneers. Professor Pentti Malaska, the founder, first chairman, and honorary chairman of the Finnish Society for Future Studies, is a pioneer in futures research. There is a book about his achievements and thinking that is available online for all. He considered the establishment and operation of the Futures Committee to be groundbreaking. Our Society of the Finnish Future Studies, as a kind of midwife community, strongly proposed and supported the creation of the Committee of the Future. Malaska also later launched the concept of futures policy. It was central, on one hand, to make the knowledge produced by futures research available to decision makers in both the private and public sectors, and on the other hand, the mission of the Committee of the Future of the Parliament to secure and pilot the future of our society through parliamentary means. Pioneers create the future. The establishment of the Committee of the Future was also influenced by other pioneers who worked with the Finnish Society for Future Studies, such pioneers as Professor Eero Paloheimo and Martti Tiuri, to mention the few most important ones. In order to create futures awareness, we need passionate pioneers who are dedicated to the cause. They are bearers of the future's champion and path-showing torch. So I have even developed a methodology how we follow pioneers and we can learn from them. For a successful national foresight ecosystem, we also need infrastructure. That means structures and stages where the drama of the future can be presented. This means a dialogue about what is the best shared vision for a country. The Futures Committee itself is also a pioneer. We have received concrete proof of this from the first World Summit of the Committees of the Future organized in Finland 2022, followed by the second meeting held in Uruguay last year. Jerome Glenn, the director of the Millennium Project of the global think tank, who is an honorary member of the Finnish Society for Future Studies as well, has closely followed the development in Finland. I am here also bringing his greetings to this conference. He was very pleased to learn and hear that this is going to be arranged. Jerome Glenn sees the role of the Finnish Committee of the Future as a global beacon that shines a light on the parliaments of other countries and their plans to establish similar bodies to navigate the turbulent seas of world politics. He specifically trusts the expertise of Finland's Futures Committee, and he wants us to convey these practices. And we are, of course, very open and humbled to help anyone who wants to learn and hear about our past experiences and activities in the field of future studies. This applies not only to the parliamentary committee work, but also to our academic research and education. A visionary society, futures-aware society, is still only a work in progress for the time being, or perhaps it will always be a continuous dynamic learning process. It has to be built on a future orientation that penetrates all levels and actors of society. Awareness of the future has been one of the basic elements of the Finnish Society for Future Studies from the beginning. Close to the heart of this Professor Pentti Malaska was to unite the two pillars of society in the society's all activities: scientific society on one hand, and government, parliamentary and civil society organizations on the other hand. And the glue is this futures awareness. It means systematic, deep thinking about the future and to put that kind of future thinking into action. The decisions and choices we make at the present moment influence and shape the future. Being aware of the future means, first of all, a strong belief in the future, that we will cope and manage together and not leave anyone behind. Secondly, futures awareness means recognizing alternatives and choosing bold pathways to make sustainable futures. Thirdly, futures awareness is something I would raise also to cover futures resilience. Futures literacy, as developed by Riel Miller in UNESCO, helps us to recognize the potential of futures hidden in the present. However, I encourage the futures committees to pay attention to futures literacy, especially as expanded to futures resilience. Crises are the new normal, and all committees of the future, and I presume this objective might be very appropriate for Latin American committees of the future, committees should aim for futures resilience and how they could develop that in their own country and region. However, the crisis should not be allowed to discourage us or anyone in society. Preparing for them and surviving them can be learned and practiced, as we have done in research projects in our futures clinics, where we immerse ourselves in future crisis situations. For example, 2 years ago, we conducted a futures clinic where the event of a total power outage had happened, or a dramatic heat wave had happened, or enemy attacked Finland, or a mental health bomb exploded. So we visualized different crises by futures resilience. Then we started thinking what are the means and instruments how we can survive them. Futures awareness creates the basis for creating and strengthening futures resilience. The interaction between the Finnish Society for Future Studies, the Finland Future Research Centre, and the Finnish Committee of the Future. This interaction has been frictionless and it continues from the beginning. So, the committee invited and always invites diverse experts from multiple backgrounds and multiple institutes to hear about the most diverse topics. This creates fertile soil for continuous and multifaceted dialogue that the Committee of the Future can profit by. Now that the Finnish Committee of the Future as an institution is already 30 years old, it should be looking into the future for the next 30 years. In fact, I proposed to the Finnish Committee of the Future, and now I have the pleasure of proposing to Latin American communities of the future 2 enduring topics in the field of futures research. One is work and the other is comprehensive security. Would Latin American committees of the future be interested in pursuing these topics? Now we are at a completely new threshold in terms of both these themes, both from the perspective of world politics, the welfare gap, the escalation of geopolitical conflicts, and this hybrid age when these concepts are apt to change very quickly and merge and confuse and create polycrises even. In terms of social cohesion, the main focus should be on providing meaningful activities for citizens, for everyone. The focus of security also changes over time and with the world around us. Examples include cybersecurity, food security, water security, home security, gene security, etc., border security, and even space security. This June, just a week ago, the Finland Future Research Centre organized our international conference in Turku, Finland. We conducted, in cooperation with Aalto University and the Finnish Society for Future Studies, a special Millennium Project session. We used various future studies methods as illustration how we can address complex issues. Such futures clinics might be illustrative for Latin American committees of the future too. This year we also tackled the futures of work through paradox probing. It is a new method which means that we address the topics of work through paradoxes to deconstruct the topic and start deeper conversations. Señoras y señores, once again, thank you very much for the invitation to give a talk to you in this conference. We have both a challenging and rewarding future work ahead of us, far into the horizon, to help make the better world. It all starts from local and regional level, with deeply futures-oriented mindset, and we just have to bear in mind that collaboration is needed critically. Above all, continuous dialogue is the key to successful foresight endeavors. Thank you very much for your attention.
Muy bien, yo les propongo lo siguiente. En la tarde hay una sesión denominada Desafíos y oportunidades para el fortalecimiento y consolidación de las comisiones de futuro parlamentarias en América Latina. Me parece que las experiencias vistas en esta sesión, fundamentalmente estos 2 casos de Finlandia, pueden servir muchísimo para analizar los factores de éxito o no para los casos de América Latina y el Caribe, analizando estas experiencias donde podremos digerirlas mejor en esa sesión. Así que vamos a ir al receso, agradecemos volver a las 11 al café y muchísimas gracias por la participación en este interesante espacio. Panel.